Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoy this free Patreon episode that was originally recorded and released back around Remembrance Day of 2019. You know, if you become a patron, you're helping us to produce more content. Now, unlike a lot of people who have a Patreon account, we don't want it so that you just give us money and get nothing in return. We have different tiers, and each tier gets different things in return each month. The idea of it is that you can deepen your knowledge of Gettysburg and the Civil War by listening to the episodes that we produce for you over there. They're a lot more focused and varied. So if you like the Ask a Gettysburg guides, I have a pretty good feeling that you're going to love what we put out over on Patreon. So give it a try for just 1 month. Go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's Patreon, patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Create an account, check out our tiers, choose the one that's right for you, and enjoy. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this free episode.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
So I can find it later. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Addressing Gettysburg. Thank you, beloved Patreon listeners. We are sitting here today with Rich Condon, who a lot of you may know if you follow, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you may know him as Civil War Pittsburgh. I know him as Richie because we go way back to, I think it was January or February or December. I met you last year.
I think it was January or February. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a long few months ago. Rich, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I know you're exhausted. Yesterday was the Remembrance Day parade. You participated in it and probably some frivolity afterwards, I'm sure, like everybody else.
It was a long affair.
Yeah. And here it is, a cold, rainy Sunday in November, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Rich, you are, like I said before, you're best known for Civil War Pittsburgh, but let's go back. Let's go back. How did little Richie get interested in the Civil War?
It actually started right here in Gettysburg when I was about 12 years old. My dad had actually taken me to Gettysburg on a whim. I remember the night we decided we were going to come down here. We watched Gettysburg. I saw it for the first time. Back then we watched it on VHS, the dual VHS tapes.
Oh yeah.
So we watched Gettysburg, and then the next morning we drive here, and I remember we went to Little Round Top, and I met a reenactor in a Berdan's sharpshooter uniform, and that's kind of when it sparked for me, and I'd been obsessed ever since.
Now, if it had been just any other uniform, would it have sparked, do you think, or is it something about the Berdan's uniform?
I just thought it was so unusual. I just watched Gettysburg. I was familiar with the blue and the gray.
Right.
That was kind of what I had in my head when I was picturing a Civil War soldier was blue or gray. And then I saw a guy in a green uniform. I'm like, what is this?
Did you think it was the Irish Brigade?
No, I wasn't sure what it was.
Because I've heard people say that.
The guy explained it to me, and I thought it was fascinating. And I was like, there's so much more out there to learn. And then I basically, came back to Pittsburgh and started buying up books, looking stuff up online, and just getting totally immersed in it.
So then I'm assuming then decided you're going to go to college for history. Is that correct?
I actually didn't know what I wanted when I was about that age. I started out as a psych major. And then,
me too.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's the default major.
Yeah. No, but I actually had an interest in psychology.
I did too.
Yeah.
And then
I found out it was a lot of reading.
Yeah, I wasn't doing very well with that. And then I'd actually switched over to music therapy because in a former life I was a professional musician, and that's back when insurance didn't cover that kind of thing. So so I switched to history, and then I decided to take a short break. I moved to Tennessee as a session musician down there, and that's actually where I got my first public history job. I actually started working for the Battle of Franklin Trust.
Interesting.
So I worked on Franklin Battlefield for a few years as a battlefield guide.
So you go. How old are you now?
I'm 30 now.
You're 30.
Yeah.
See, this is something about your generation that just I'm jealous of. Is you pack so much into 20 to 30. Like or maybe we all did. It's just it didn't seem so interesting when I did it. But like you were a musician. You moved to Tennessee, and you a session musician, plays in studios on recordings. Is that what you're talking about?
Studios, recordings, and would
Like
also
live
do
gigs.
tours. Yeah.
You're a gun for hire, basically. is
Yeah,
what that
pretty
means.
much.
All right, and then so how did you jump from that to Franklin?
Well, so I've played music and I've been interested in history the same. I started playing music when I was 12.
Okay.
Same exact time when I got into history. So it's always been kind of these two parallels.
Fighting for you.
Yeah, fighting for me since that age. And, the Franklin job, I basically kind of reached out of the blue and emailed the director.
Okay.
And, I heard back a short while later. And then they asked, what can you start? And are you comfortable with talking to groups of 20 or more? And at the time, I'd never really done any public speaking. And that sounded terrifying to me. And I just said, yeah, sure, why not? And I kind of just threw myself into it, and it just worked out, and I've been doing it ever since.
So then how long are you there for in Franklin?
I think it was 2012 to 2015, 16, somewhere around there.
And then you moved back to Pittsburgh?
Moved back to Pittsburgh, and I stayed there for a little bit, and then I moved to Frederick, Maryland. I was finishing up some schooling at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia.
Sure.
And then I
Makes
moved
sense.
back to Pittsburgh in April of 2018.
Okay. Oh, so just recently.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you start Civil War Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I started Civil War Pittsburgh in the first week of December of 2018, so we're almost a year old.
And what was the goal of starting Civil War Pittsburgh? Was it well? You tell me. What was the goal of it?
So my full time job is I'm a seasonal ranger, interp ranger at Flight 93 National Memorial. So I'm off from around late October to mid April. So Civil War Pittsburgh really was something for me to occupy my time. It's something I've always wanted to do. Basically what sparked Civil War Pittsburgh was, one of my friends was in town. Actually, he's a Western Pennsylvania native. He was in town around October, November of last year. And they had the Civil War Historians Conference in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh. And we went out for drinks one night, and he said, "This is great. Like, I love this conference, but why would they have it here in Pittsburgh if they're not going to do any kind of Civil War tour of Pittsburgh? What's the point in having it here or hosting it here? You might as well have it in Vegas at that point." So, I was like, yeah, there should be a Civil War tour, an organized Civil War tour of Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania. And I kind of let that marinate for a bit. And then in the first week of December, when I'm in my off season, it started off with social media. So I used kind of Facebook and Instagram as a launching pad for Civil War Pittsburgh. And it's kind of grown out of that ever since.
And a lot of people listening who are maybe new to the whole study of the Civil War or the Gettysburg campaign might be thinking to themselves, well, what the hell does this have to do with Gettysburg? What does Pittsburgh have to do with it? Or even the Civil War? Was there a battle there? What the dilly?
So, early on, Pittsburgh had Allegheny Arsenal, which was a mass producer of ammunition.
Okay.
For the Federal Army. You also had Fort Pitt Foundry, which is the modern Strip District in Pittsburgh, right outside of the city.
The modern what?
Strip District. The Strip District is basically like a string of shops and things like that.
Malls.
Kind of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you mean, kind of?
So it's a lot of kind of mom and pop stores.
Yeah, but in little
this
strips,
one
right?
concentrated area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of people go.
Glad you clarified that.
Yeah. On Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, people will go out to the Strip District and go to like the fish market, things like that.
Okay.
So anyway, that's where the Fort Pitt Foundry used to be. You would never even know it was there now. There's literally nothing left of it. But they were actually producing guns there.
So it was in the beginning at least supporting the war effort for the Union.
Yeah,
Part of supporting.
They were high functioning before the Civil War. For example, Allegheny Arsenal, I think, employed somewhere around 700-800 people before the Civil War, and
but obviously it's going to be ramped up when the war comes.
They bumped their employment up to about 1,200 people after that, and it's like a roughly 35-acre plot of land that you have this arsenal sitting on. It's right on the Allegheny River, so you can easily ship stuff on that goes to the Ohio. Pittsburgh is the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers into the Ohio. So that's where it starts. That plays a key role into Pittsburgh's importance in the Civil War. It's considered a gateway to the West. Mm-hmm. You have Allegheny Arsenal, you have Fort Pitt Foundry, and you have this city that's surrounded by hills and mountains. It basically sits in like a bowl. This is why the British and the French see it as such a key point around the time of the French and Indian War. That's why they built Fort Duquesne and Fort Pitt there originally. So anyway, in 1861, a team of U.S. Army engineers are going to visit the city of Pittsburgh and deem it one of the most defendable points in all of the Union. When they're looking at this terrain and this city just sitting in the middle, they're basically saying if you're to build forts around this city, it'd be very defendable. Mm-hmm. And that
as long as you can hold those forts.
As long as you can hold those forts, right. Very defendable. And that's why this, we're talking about the Civil War fortifications of Pittsburgh that are built in June of 1863. That comes into play, just under 2 years after those engineers had visited. Now,
when we were first starting to talk about this before we officially started the episode, you were saying that there was a panic when the Confederates invaded Pennsylvania during the Gettysburg campaign, but that wasn't the first panic that they had out in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And why? What was this? So from the beginning, they were, I guess it was kind of a lot like how people were in Gettysburg for the same reasons. It was close proximity to
the border. Yeah. So, today, if you were to drive from downtown Pittsburgh to the West Virginia border, it might take you 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
That's a roughly 1 day or so march for an army.
And West Virginia at that point
didn't exist.
Virginia.
It was Virginia. So Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania is bordering enemy territory up until June 20th, 1963, which is right smack dab in the middle of the panic.
Right. And June 20th is when they start to build these fortifications?
Actually, the fortifications are being constructed as early as around June 14th.
So they get wind that the Confederate Army is on the move?
They're catching wind that the Confederate Army's in the move.
They just sacked Winchester.
Yeah, they're hearing rumors that the Confederate Army is moving swiftly through Cumberland, Maryland, and kind of moving up into western Pennsylvania. So there was false reports, coming left and right, but people really didn't know what to believe.
Right.
If you look at, I mentioned earlier before we started the podcast, other places like central Pennsylvania, Altoona, or out near Philly, they're constructing fortifications out there as well.
Right. So nobody knows.
They don't know where he's headed, but they thought that Pittsburgh, having Allegheny Arsenal and Fort Pitt Foundry, these military powerhouses in the city, that the Confederates would want to invade a city and take over those institutions.
Right.
But also, like I said before, that's also a gateway to the West. You could kind of cut the North in half if you were to take a city like Pittsburgh. June 14th, like I said, is when they're going to start constructing these fortifications. Edwin Stanton actually sent a notice to Thomas Howell.
Thomas Howell?
To see Thomas Howell.
I didn't know he's that old. I'm just kidding.
He sends this report up to Western Pennsylvania. Howell is adjutant general appointed by Andrew Curtin in Western Pennsylvania. and basically tells him about, what's going on, that the Confederates may be headed in this direction, and basically tells him to start preparing. And they're going to appoint a man named William T.H. Brooks, Major General William T.H. Brooks, as commander of the newly formed Department of the Monongahela.
Okay.
Which this department is formed on June 9th. It basically spans from far eastern Ohio all the way out to around Johnstown area.
Okay.
So it basically covers all of western Pennsylvania. And it's going to be headquartered in Pittsburgh. So that's where Brooks is going to be headquartered. And he's basically charged with building these defenses.
And the Department of the Susquehanna is also founded on that day, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's all. That covers the other side of the state.
And that's where Gettysburg falls in.
Yeah.
So that's Couch is under that, or in command of that department. Yeah. And, okay, so just for the people that are trying to keep track of everything. Okay, so
out this way.
You got the Monongahela and the Susquehanna. You have two departments in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Or do you have...
There's two.
There's two.
Yeah.
So that would include, the Susquehanna would include Philly and all that stuff,
yeah.
too. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Go ahead.
So he's charged with building these defenses. And basically on June 14th, they're going to meet, basically a citywide meeting, and decide, we need to start building these defenses quickly. We don't know when the rebel army is going to arrive at the front door of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So essentially what they do is they shut down the city of Pittsburgh for a short period of time. A lot of businesses are going to be shut down. A lot of these businesses are going to commit their workforce to constructing these fortifications on the heights around the city.
Right.
So ultimately, they're going to build about 37 fortifications. And when I say fortifications, I mean, earthen, not stone forts or anything.
Right.
Something very quick and efficient. So, you might have anywhere from 200 to 900 people working on one fort alone. They're going to commit about 16,000 people to building these forts. Pretty much every able-bodied man is called into work on these forts.
Right, and I have a quote here that is on your website, civilwarpittsburgh.com. A meeting had been held Tuesday evening about the rebels coming here, that they were at Chambersburg, and this morning all the factories and boundaries. Boundaries?
Yeah.
Not foundries?
What's it say?
It says boundaries. Is that right?
Foundries.
Is that a typo?
Might be a typo.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'll read it again with the correct word. A meeting had been held Tuesday. A meeting had been held Tuesday evening about the rebels coming here, that they were at Chambersburg, and this morning all the factories and foundries and works of all kinds were stopped to have the men work on fortifications, and they are now at work on Heron's Hill and out at Turtle Creek. I will send you what is in the Gazette about it. For my part, I can't feel afraid, but I think we should be prepared. Wait, hold on. For my part, I can't feel afraid, but I think we should be prepared to give them a suitable reception. So they're making these fortifications. This guy here, who is this?
That's actually a letter that was written by the mother. She lived in Oakland, in Pittsburgh, but she'd written that letter to her son in the 155th Pennsylvania Infantry.
So this
Henry
is
Breed.
So this is a mother writing to her son.
Yeah,
a mother back in Pittsburgh writing to her son out in the field.
Yep.
With his regiment, and she's now she's not going to actually be picking up a gun should something happen, but she's saying we, as in Pittsburgh, are going to give them a suitable reception.
Yeah,
right?
and that was kind of that's the mentality that was kind of spread across the city.
So clearly, people who hadn't seen war.
Yeah.
And
I think there was even a illustration that came out in Harper's Weekly. There was something very similar to that, and they talk about giving Lee a suitable reception. The print that was in Harper's Weekly was actually about the fortifications around Harrisburg, but there was the same mentality in Pittsburgh. A lot of the citizens saw it as a citywide, we're all in it together. Mm-hmm. That woman is writing to her son, Henry Breed, who is in, like I said, the 155th Pennsylvania. So he's in the front, and her other son, who is Dr. David Breed, he's actually attending what is now University of Pittsburgh. He actually leaves and becomes a pastor.
What was it then?
It was Western Pennsylvania University.
Okay, go ahead.
And
pastor.
He's
become a pastor, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, he's going to drop out, and then he becomes a pastor.
Okay.
But he actually, 30 years after that, roughly, in 1894, is going to go around and photograph the remains of those forts that were constructed that his mother is talking about in 1863.
Okay. So there's no wartime photos of those.
There's no wartime photos. The only known photos of the forts were taken in the 1890s. And he was kind of he started out as an amateur photographer. He actually became quite good at it. But he went around to the remaining forts that he knew about, and he photographed them. Mm-hmm. And you can see they're still, I mean, they're pretty formidable. I mean, they look like wartime photos. They're for example, Fort McKeever, which is a little bit above Pittsburgh's north side, was one of the largest ones. And all these photographs were eventually donated to Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, where they are now. So it's in their collection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Gettysburg campaign is underway. The word is out. The Confederates are in Pennsylvania. They're at Chambersburg. How many of them actually go out to Pittsburgh?
As far as...
How many Confederates actually go and...
Toward Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
0.
Okay. But now we say this with hindsight, I make a joke, but, but at the time they didn't know where the hell
panic.
They were going.
They didn't. The people of Pittsburgh are working on these. They're so determined to get these fortifications done that they actually closed down all the bars in Pittsburgh.
Whoa.
And pubs for a short period of time.
That's some serious business.
Yeah. So no drinking, nothing.
Wow.
Until we get these fortifications done and we know that we're safe.
And then drinks are on the mayor.
Yeah. But they really don't. They're working up until like the first week of July. Once they hear the Confederate Army's been repelled at Gettysburg and they're moving further south, they're still constructing these forts up until about July 4th.
Now, while the Confederate Army is moving through Chambersburg and then Carlisle and all that jazz, the refugees, do any of them flee to Pittsburgh?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't
So you're
think
not getting a ton of them. I mean, that's kind of but that's like a 4-hour drive today, right?
That's,
from here?
That's quite a hike. Yeah.
So they're
to go
not
all the way there.
Yeah. There's plenty of places they can go in between.
Yeah.
Those mountains.
Yeah. They can hide in the mountains.
Yeah. Now, what's left of these? Okay, but before we get to today, let's continue the story. So the Battle of Gettysburg occurs. They're still building them until July 4th, you just said.
Yeah. Well, they're actually going to try to man these forts.
Okay. With what?
Well, they're going to put out a call. I mentioned how he's actually going to put out a call. He posted in the local newspapers saying they need some able-bodied men to man these forts that are being constructed. So they're going to have maybe a little over 1,000 people that are going to volunteer for it. As short-time militia units. They don't, to my knowledge, ever really take any artillery up to these positions. I think they were planning on it being like a last-minute thing. As far as militia manning the forts goes, they were in those forts for a very, very short period of time.
Okay.
I don't even know if these men were well armed. But they're going to, the fifth, I believe it was the 15th Pennsylvania Militia is what they raised to have manning these forts.
Okay.
So, like I said, they construct them, they have people in there for a short period of time, and they kind of just abandon them. And they remain, obviously. And actually in 1864, they named a lot of these forts after the locations they were built. For example, one of them is called Fort Croghan. It's actually named after the Croghan estate. For anyone that's familiar with the Pittsburgh area, Shenley is a huge name in Pittsburgh. Shenley Park, for example, named after Mary Shenley, who had donated money to these different places. So
she wrote Frankenstein, right?
That's where she got all her money. So Mary Shenley's father...
It's Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley.
That's who wrote Frankenstein. It's just so people
clarify.
know that I do know the difference. I'm just making jokes. Okay, go ahead.
So Shenley's father had built her a mansion. They called it the Picnic House on a place called Black Horse Hill, which is above the modern day Morningside neighborhood or Stanton Avenue, actually named for Edwin Stanton.
Sure.
So they built this mansion up there. I believe it was 1830. And this mansion is going to be on that site at the time of the Gettysburg campaign, and they built this fort around the mansion, or on the mansion property, and so they called it Fort Croghan. So like that, a lot of these forts are named after the locations they're built or the farms they're built on, and by 1864 they start to rename a lot of these forts so that they still meant something to the people of Pittsburgh. They're renaming them in honor of fallen officers from the Pittsburgh area.
Oh, all right.
For example, one of them is Fort Childs, named after James Harvey Childs, who's killed at Antietam, from the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry. And so they actually published an article, I think it was the Pittsburgh Daily Post, and they actually named all the forts that they're renaming at that point in time. So they built those forts, and keep in mind they had no idea when this war is going to end.
Right,
the
sure.
Confederate Army could always come back into Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So it's something they're always kind of on the fence about. They leave these forts remaining just in case they ever might have to occupy them again.
Okay. And does their fear ever... is it ever justified? Are they ever invaded or visited by any Confederate forces throughout the war?
The only Confederate forces they're going to be visited by are ones that are going to be housed in Western Penitentiary
Okay.
in Allegheny City, which is Pittsburgh's north side now. But you have guys from John Hunt Morgan's raid through Ohio. A lot of these guys are going to be captured at the Battle of Salineville, which is near eastern Ohio.
Sounds like a salty place.
So,
I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
these guys are going to be captured in late July of 63. So not long after those forts are constructed, and a portion of the force under Morgan is going to be sent to the prison at Western Penitentiary between late summer and early spring of 1864. These guys are going to be housed there.
Okay.
So aside from that, really, I mean, you have, Pittsburgh is a hub, a railroad hub. You have prisoners passing through the entire war. But that's really the closest these Confederates are going to get into the city is, under arrest.
Being prisoners, right?
Yeah.
So then after the war, what becomes of these places? They make them a park or anything? Or
A lot of them are developed. When they start building housing developments and the city just starts to expand, they start to just,
do they name any of these
over.
developments after the fort? Like, as because sometimes they'll do that. They'll name a section of town after a fort that was once there.
There are some, like Fort McKeever, for example, above the north side. That is the site of a school now called Presley Ridge.
After Elvis.
After Elvis. Has nothing to do with the
anything.
fort. There is, however, you can still see rifle pits at the base of the hill. About 50 yards of rifle pits are still there.
How many remnants are there of these fortifications?
There's not a whole lot left. Especially with Pittsburgh's a rapidly growing city, especially now.
Right.
There's a lot of development going on. So there are. I've been to 2 sites where there's still a significant amount of evidence left that there is forts there.
And are these sites preserved, or is it just
No.
like a patch of woods that's...
Yeah, it's a patch. You have to kind of know what you're looking for to find them.
Well, so and is there any kind of effort going on to preserve them and make something, like a park or something out of them?
There hasn't been.
Why not?
But, that's something, one of the projects I've been working on as of late is with Civil War Trails.
Uh-huh.
And they're starting to kind of make some headway here in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. One of the things we're talking about is trying to expand into Western PA, specifically Pittsburgh. It really is more on, the ball's in the court of local tourism bureaus,
right,
and raising awareness and interest in getting signs in these places, and kind of raising finances to do so. But we've been discussing with them about marking some of these places, such as the forts, or Allegheny Arsenal, or Allegheny Cemetery, or even Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum. But that's a work in progress. Yeah.
So do you take people out there on to the places that Like, do you take people out there for tours, or?
Yeah.
But who owns it? Is the city, or?
A lot of it's private. There's some that are private property.
Oh, okay.
One of them, I mentioned Fort Croghan. That's probably the most well preserved one now. You get out there and that you see a significant amount of rifle pits and trenches, and you can tell that was a fort at some point in time.
And are they all wooded areas, or are they still open?
Back then, if you look at the 1890s photos, they're all clear.
Yeah, they're wide open.
Yeah. And you get an amazing view of the city if you know what you're looking for too. But that one in particular is on the grounds of a retirement home.
Okay.
So anytime I take a group or people to that fort, and I have to contact them and say, hey, just so you know, we're not doing anything.
Right. Don't get scared.
Don't get scared. There's going to be a group of people just traipsing around in your backyard.
Right.
But I have to. I usually contact them and let them know. The other one, Fort Childs in Pittsburgh's north side, is kind of in the middle of a neighborhood. I'm not quite sure whose property it is, but you can there's like a path that just goes out there, and you kind of go about 50 to 100 yards out in the woods, and you're there.
Right.
The rest of them, like I said, out of 37 fortifications, there's not much left. Those are the only two that I've found so far. And like I said, the rifle pits at Fort McKeever.
Okay.
So, I try to be very transparent with people when I'm going to these places. I have taken tour groups out there. I think the biggest group I've taken out was actually the General Meade Society of Philadelphia.
Oh, cool.
We had a group back in October. It was about 45 people or so. And, I took them all out in the woods. So this giant group of people is traipsing around in the woods. And it's funny because a lot of people that work at that retirement home don't realize this fort's even there. They just don't care.
Nah, most people don't.
Yeah, I think the director is really the only person that is aware of it. Because back in the 90s, they did a survey. There was somebody from University of Pittsburgh who actually went around and did a survey of the remaining forts. There's a few things I think they missed that I've thankfully found in the last year or so. But they did a pretty good job with marking a lot of these ones.
What did they miss that you found?
The rifle
Indiana
pits.
Jones.
It feels like Indiana Jones. The rifle pits at Fort McKeever is a good example. But there's actually a map that was put together in 1963. I think it was July 20th of 1963 by engineer Captain William Craighill. And so he's actually sent up from the D.C. area up to Pittsburgh to map out all of the fortifications. And he's actually going to assist in the placement of the fortifications. So the people of Pittsburgh didn't kind of, all willy-nilly just throw these fortifications up in a panic.
Right. There
is an organization to it. The Federal Army was assisting in constructing these fortifications and directing these people to place them strategically around the city.
Right.
So he actually makes a map that year of the fortifications, and that's really what I've been using when I go looking for these places.
So, well, I hope that you can actually get some luck with Civil War trails and do something to keep those.
I'm crossing my fingers. It's like I said, it's a work in progress, but I think it'll do a lot of good.
Is there anything that anybody listening can do to help push that along? Or
if you contact Visit Pittsburgh, that's really the organization we're trying to target in terms of trying to raise awareness and interest in getting Civil War trails in Western Pennsylvania, or Visit PA.
What about the American Battlefield Trust?
American Battlefield Trust, I haven't tried them yet. We're trying to get more local tourism bureaus. Yeah. I would love to have American Battlefield Trust involved, but I know that we need to start targeting these local tourism bureaus too.
Sure. Okay, well, I hope that works. I hope you get some luck with that. Now, what's the other thing that you got going on is what is it? Civil War, PA? Civil War. What is it?
Oh, Pennsylvania Civil War.
Yeah, let me try that again so it doesn't sound like I don't know my guess. Pennsylvania Civil War, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Pennsylvania.
Wait. So the other thing you have is Pennsylvania Civil War. What is that now?
So Pennsylvania in the Civil War.
Oh, Pennsylvania in the Civil War.
Pennsylvania in the Civil War.
That's why I asked you again. Let's try it again. The other thing you have is Pennsylvania in the Civil War. What is that?
Pennsylvania in the Civil War is basically it's an idea that was basically concocted a few months ago by myself and a few other guys, young historians and from the Pennsylvania area. They don't all necessarily live in Pennsylvania anymore, but they're natives of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So it's basically a blog. We have a website, penncivilwar.com, and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So very similar to Civil War Pittsburgh, the launching pad for Penn Civil War was social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then we formed a website. And so, between myself and a few other younger historians, mostly in their late 20s, we kind of put this thing together to touch on the unknown history of Pennsylvania's role in the Civil War. Mm-hmm. So we kind of like those obscure stories that haven't been touched on yet or haven't been talked about in depth in a long time.
Right.
And kind of fleshing out that information.
Like the northernmost battle of the Civil War.
The northernmost battle of the Civil War.
Battle of Schrute Farms.
The Battle of Schrute
Farms.
So, we're trying to kind of flesh that out, but we also, like Civil War Pittsburgh, have done Facebook Live events.
Yep.
We found that to be a super useful tool in reaching the general public. Not everyone can make it out for a Civil War tour on the battlefield, so why not bring it to them? You can watch it from your phone.
What I find is weird is I have a larger following on Instagram. I found it easier to build that and get interaction from them. Facebook sucks, but the thing that I think is better about Facebook is you could do live videos and they stay there.
Yeah.
Instagram, they're gone in 24 hours. And you try to save it sometimes to your phone and it doesn't save. It's very unreliable.
If you do post a video on Instagram and want it to be permanent, you can only do it for like a minute unless you post several segments. But yeah, Instagram is more of like kind of a quick fix. Mm-hmm. Facebook is something you can put a little more substantial online.
I think I'm going to start trying to push my followers over to Facebook.
Facebook is really useful. I use both of them equally.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can post more in-depth stories on Facebook if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
With Instagram, I use it as like kind of a quick touch and go. Like, I'll post a photo and do a paragraph or two at most.
Right.
It's kind of like a condensed
Facebook.
Yeah. And you want it to be more palatable. So like the general public looks at it, reads a short bit of information, they kind of get the idea and they find it interesting.
Yeah.
And, click
but
like and go.
I just find that people on Facebook, Facebook brings out the nasty in a lot of people. I find
there are a lot of trolls on Facebook.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Instagram isn't like that.
Or if it is, it's like, it's so rare that it's very easy to just block somebody. You know what I mean? Like,
it is.
Like more, if you have 2,000 followers and you get like one or two trolls,
yeah,
it's just like, well, I don't need you. And then you block them and that's it. Right. But at Facebook, it's because of that algorithm they have. And here's the problem I heard about with Facebook. If you have a page and you buy an ad once, they now know you're willing to spend money. So they suppress everything in order to get you to keep buying.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, and unless you had, like, if you had a lot of interaction before you bought and you still get that interaction, like, people are still going to see it. But if you didn't and then you bought in order to get noticed, you've
interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's what I've heard. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but that's what I've heard. And then it makes sense because I did buy an ad once and ever since then it's like impossible to get any traction.
But they one of the things about Facebook is, if you talk to younger generations now, they say Facebook's for old people. Yeah. And so I guess I'm considered an old person.
Yeah.
But, I don't, I find it super useful.
Sure.
And it's been very successful on Facebook and Instagram equally. So I think there's nothing wrong with it.
No, there isn't. No.
But, and I just launched the Civil War Pittsburgh website about a month ago or so. So a little bit late, but Civil War Pittsburgh still in its infancy. Like I said, it's under a year old. But civilwarpittsburgh.com is mostly used to post more in-depth articles, post more photos, things like that. So if you go to Facebook and Instagram, you kind of get like the condensed version. You go to the website, you get something a little more in-depth if people really want that, and everything you get on Facebook, you get on the website too, event notifications and stuff like that. And, I like being able to interact with people who are interested in Civil War Pittsburgh or Penn Civil War. If they sign up as a subscriber, we can send out like a monthly newsletter and kind of bring them up to speed on everything that's going on.
Are you thinking of doing a podcast ever? Because I think that'd be an interesting podcast.
I've had several people ask me that, and I would love to. I've done in the last couple of months, especially, I've done quite a few podcasts, like not my podcast, but other people's podcasts. Right. And
none quite so prestigious as this one.
And I love it. I love kind of having a good conversation with fellow historians, or people who just want to know about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if I get the time, I'd love to.
I think you should. I think you should do it, and it's. I'll show you like a quick and inexpensive kit to set up with.
Yeah.
And you could do it. It's easy. You could be mobile if you have a laptop, like if you wanted to do something like that. Yeah, you should definitely do it because it's an interesting subject. I don't think people know or think of Pittsburgh and the Civil War, or even Pennsylvania. I mean, I can't tell you how disappointed I am in my fellow man when especially when I was living back in New Jersey, and when I was telling people that I was going to move here, they would say one of two things. Oh, all that George Washington shit? Or, well, you've always loved Virginia. And I'm like, no, Gettysburg's in Pennsylvania. And they're like, well, I thought it was the Civil War, or, if they knew it was the Civil War. And so I think a Civil War Pittsburgh podcast would be very interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, you can cover, even if it's kind of short episodes, 15-minute episodes, you can cover kind of these small, obscure stories. Because we don't just cover... The whole point of Civil War Pittsburgh is to raise awareness about Pittsburgh's role in the Civil War, or Western Pennsylvania's role in the Civil War, but also to raise awareness in the effort to preserve a lot of these places and stories. Because in a rapidly growing city, sadly, a lot more buildings and locations are being lost to modern development.
And you know what? I think a podcast as a tool for what you're trying to do to preserve the land would help tremendously.
Yeah.
I mean, because, people would just see it because like, oh, I didn't know that. Let's hit play and see what happens. And then if every episode you mention that you're trying to preserve this land and direct them somewhere to show their support or send help or whatever the hell it may be, I think it can only help you to do that. I think you should do it. I think you should do it. Let's start this campaign to get you to do a podcast about the Civil War. That might actually be the only other podcast I would listen to.
Well, I appreciate that
because that's new and that's new to me, and I love learning about new things. So I would actually listen to that.
There actually is a really good history podcast, fairly new, I guess you could say, like in the last year. A new podcast that's come out called the Pittsburgh Oddcast.
Okay.
And it's a local historian. His name's John Shalkowski. And he basically started his organization on Facebook. It's I think it's the Odd, Mysterious, and Fascinating History of Pittsburgh. So he's done like Allegheny Arsenal and a few Civil War related things, but mostly general history of Pittsburgh and kind of like the obscure stories that not everyone knows about, and kind of fleshing those out.
See, I'm becoming more interested in Pittsburgh. I know you. I know Donnie, who runs American Civil War IG.
Oh yeah,
and who else? Oh, my friend John. There's a few other people that I've met since moving back here that are from Pittsburgh, and they're totally not like what I thought Pittsburghians were.
What'd you picture?
Well, so my I've never been there. So my image of the city and the people is only what Hollywood has given me. So a very smoky, coal infested, like steel,
Yeah,
dirty.
that ceased in about 1958.
Yeah, well, those are the movies I watch.
Yeah.
But and then the people wasn't no, Mystic River wasn't. No, that's up in Boston. I don't know. There's some movie that from the 90s that takes place in Pittsburgh, and it's just like very like not dingy, but like gritty looking,
Yeah.
and depressing and cold and wintry. And I was like, ugh, I don't think I ever want to go to Pittsburgh.
Mothman prophecies?
No, because wasn't that West Virginia?
But
it's
the
near-
actual story is West Virginia. They did a lot of filming in Pittsburgh.
Oh, did they?
That movie, yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe that. You know what? I'm gonna have
It's
to go
mostly
back.
wintertime.
Yeah,
too.
and it might be that movie because that I love that movie.
Pittsburgh's considered now to be like the East Coast Hollywood because a lot of modern movies and Netflix series are being filmed in the Pittsburgh area because it's so cheap to film there. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make it a point in the next 5 years of my life to actually visit.
Well, I'll be happy to give you a Civil War tour.
Oh no, I definitely want to come out for that. Well, maybe this coming year. I'm not going to wait 5 years because I'll be dead by then. Who knows? So yeah, in the next year maybe I'll come out. 'Cause I have a lot of reasons to go out there. So I don't know why I don't just do it. It's probably because I hate sitting in the car for 4 hours.
Understandable.
Yeah. All right. So then. What else? Now, you do speaking engagements. Well, here's what I want to talk about before we get to that. You are a seasonal ranger at Flight 93, you mentioned before, in Shanksville.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What is there?
So, if you go to Flight 93 National Memorial, there's a couple different sites you can see. Well, the main one is the Memorial Plaza, where you can actually see the crash site itself.
And what is there to see?
So there's what they call a wall of names. It's 40 individual marble slabs with the names of the passengers and crew members who died on Flight 93.
Is there a crater there?
No, that was all filled in.
Filled in.
Not too long after.
Why?
Why was it filled in?
Yeah.
That's the final resting place of everyone who's on the plane. And so they thought that was the most appropriate.
Yeah. So is that marked out in any way?
There's a giant boulder. There's a 17-ton boulder that marks the crash site.
And so how big compared to the boulder?
Was the crater?
Yeah.
The initial crater was 15 feet deep and 30 feet wide. And the FBI, when they did their investigation, expanded it. So then it was about 40 feet deep and 80 feet wide. And then they filled that back in after they were finished with their investigation.
So 15 deep, 30 wide.
Yeah.
That sounds bigger than it looked on TV. So, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the plane, is going...
Plane is how wide? The fuselage is how wide on the plane? On that plane? It's not 30 feet.
No, it's not 30 feet.
So,
that's the wings. Like, you can see like where the wings were.
Yeah.
You can clearly see a plane crash there, but it's like it disintegrated. I mean, it was going 563 miles an hour. It's carrying 5,500 gallons of jet fuel.
Yeah.
And it's crashing into a former strip mine. It was all backfilled, so it's like, crashing into a sandbox.
Yeah.
And, a lot of that debris is flying out into the woods. A lot of it is absorbed into the ground.
So that's why they had to dig deeper and wider.
Yeah, exactly. They stopped finding stuff at about 35 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, if you go there, you see the Memorial Plaza, the Visitor Center, which was just dedicated in 2015. So you go through the exhibit and kind of, you could send... Since now, it's 2019, this is 18 years later, you have these new generations of kids that weren't even alive when it happened.
Yeah, no, that's so weird.
It was built with the idea that future generations will be coming through here. And, giving them kind of the condensed experience and kind of walking them chronologically through what happened here.
So, like here, Gettysburg, you got, are you pressed for time? Do you have to get going?
Yeah, my buddy wants to get on the road here.
All right. We'll wrap it up at this session.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Just let me do this one point and then we'll...
Sure.
Okay. What was I saying? He could have come here too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course. The more the merrier, Rich. Next time, remember that. Okay, so... so now you come to Gettysburg, right?
Uh-huh.
The story all takes place. It plays out over this vast stretch of land, and you can, there were movements and things like that. I'm imagining, and I haven't been there, so you tell me. Flight 93, a plane goes straight into the ground. People die. What is when people come there for a tour and you take them on a tour? What are they seeing? What are you showing them?
So typically the programming season is throughout the summertime from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And it can vary, but that's our heaviest program season. It's usually, we'll do like a 25, 30-minute program. Everyone kind of varies, but we give the story of Flight 93 in the context of September 11th, 2001.
Okay.
And that's typically what we do on a day-to-day basis, but we also have specialized programs that different Rangers will come up with, talking
like
about...
we do here.
Exactly. Rangers here at Gettysburg will pick a certain troop movement and kind of go on that and take you out to that part of the field. At Flight 93 National Memorial, we'll pick maybe a certain aspect of September 11th, 2001 we'd like to touch on. For example, I did a program last year that was on memorialization and how we remember certain things. And I kind of walked people chronologically through the history of memorialization from the, dawn of time, as far as we know, to modern memorialization. How do we remember a tragic event like September 11th, 2001? And how do we go about properly memorializing the people who died that day? And so that's just kind of an example of the programs we'll come up with. There are, some programs people want to see the memorial and how it's grown over the years. So sometimes we'll do like maybe an hour and a half tour of that. How did this memorial come to be? How did they get the idea for like a natural landscape kind of memorial? For example, Flight 93 National Memorial, the architect wanted it to surround the crash site. He wanted it to frame the crash site. He didn't want it to be imposing. And they executed that perfectly.
Okay. That's another place I have to get to.
Definitely, and it's not too far from here. You can always stop there on the way to Pittsburgh. It's about 2 hours away from here.
You got to go. So I want to have you back on another time because you just said that you talked about the history of memorialization.
Yeah,
and I would like to have you come on to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to,
because I've always kind of wondered. We seem to. Almost immediately, you look like somebody dies in a car crash on a highway. The next day, there's crosses and flowers up. Like, we immediately go to memorialize. Did the humans always do that? Don't answer that now. Okay. That's for next time. But you do speaking engagements. People can hire you to come out and talk to them, right?
Yes.
And you can talk on a number of subjects, I'm sure. And so if you want Rich to come out and speak to your group or to whatever, maybe just you alone in your living room. Right? If they're going to pay, if you've got the money, Rich has got the time, right? If you have the money,
I will happily entertain you in my living room.
All right. No, not your living room, their living room. All right. So you get a hold of him at rich@civilwarpittsburgh.com. You can also go to www.civilwarpittsburgh.com. Follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Rich, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Absolutely. And thank you all for listening. There you go. It's that easy.
It was easy.